In this segment, we're going to have a look at two approaches to data collection. And the first one's focus group, which is an option that you have, and the second one is observation. So let's just start off with focus group. The notion of a focus group traditionally was to get a group of key participants from the community and to understand the different perspectives that they had on a particular aspect of whatever it was that was important to the researcher. It's a quick way of getting data from a number of people. So how many people would you have? Well, you might only have 2 or 3 or 4 or 6. I tend to go for somewhere between 6 and 12. Once you get to 12, it starts to get a bit unwieldy, and the facilitator or interviewer is the one who has to somehow manage that much larger group, and that's not all that easy. The idea is that it should run for about an hour, but in that hour you get a diversity of opinion. So instead of one face-to-face equals one opinion, one focus group may equal as many opinions as the number of people that you've got in the group. Now, you need to develop your questions prior, and they do need to be fairly focused. It depends on the purpose of the focus group. Sometimes it's just for broad exploration of the field. Sometimes it's, okay, if we put in place this policy, what are going to be the problems? So that would be exploratory. Sometimes it's very focused, like a cost-benefit analysis of aged in South Australia, was asking questions like, well, what do you contribute? How do you contribute? How much do you contribute in terms of time, energy, money to other people? And so it was much more focused in terms of the data that they actually needed to get. So you organise your questions and make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to answer. The problem would be in a focus group if you've got a group of people and 1 or 2 of them just go silent and you don't actually get their opinions, and that's not so good. The disadvantages of focus group is that the data is fairly thin, it's very focused, and you can't really follow up on anything that looks particularly interested that they've actually said. So in your research focus group, you usually use 2 people. I always video them, but I imagine you can use just a digital recorder if you're doing it, or a video if you have access to one. The advantages of the video is that you've got instant transcription. If you record them, you've still got to transcribe them. But for this exercise, regardless of what you have in terms of recording device, you're going to actually have to transcribe. So I'm afraid it probably won't make a great deal of difference. The group dynamics can be quite interesting, and you have to be fairly skilled, particularly if you get 1 or 2 people who are just starting to headbang and decide that they want their voices to be heard and no one else is going to get a Guernsey. In that situation, you have to sometimes stop and actually set in place some sort of rules, like you can talk for 2 minutes and then I'm going to knock on the desk or do whatever it is. So you might have to control the group in that particular way. Let's have a look at how you facilitate the session. You really do need to get people into a situation where they're all going to be comfortable. If you're videoing, you don't usually use a table because you're interested in capturing the non-verbal interaction as well. You do need to introduce yourself. You need to get them to wear name tags and get them to introduce themselves. You need to go through the process of explaining what the purpose of the focus group is, what's going to be done with the data. They don't have to answer every question. They can leave at any point, but you sincerely hope that they will not. You also have the second person, because in a normal focus group, if somebody becomes upset and leaves, you really need to chase them down, make sure that they're okay in case they go out and hop into their car and have an accident. So you have responsibility. And I've been doing a fair bit of focus group interviews for bereavement groups, and that tends to happen quite a lot. So when you finish, reflect back, summarise what you think has come out of it, and make sure that everybody knows what it is that's been said so they can add in something extra. Focus groups, you tend to offer people money or something reasonable in terms of the fact that they've given up their time and energy, come in, perhaps paid for public transport or babysitters or whatever it is, and you try and sort that out. And then you indicate what you're going to do with the data and any further follow-up that you might want to make. So usually focus groups are regarded as intact units, and you tend not to go beyond that in terms of follow-up. techniques that you might want to consider in running a focus group. It's depending on the people. Brainstorming is an option. Just throw a question into the middle and see what happens, and then start following it up more carefully. Hypotheticals can work, particularly if the area is sensitive. You might have a video or a case study, and you might just present that to people and say, well, okay, how does this match your experience or your experience in this field? Would you like to add to it? And that way you start the ball rolling. Some people, and it's a useful technique to use, is this. Some people prefer the circle approach, and it's a useful technique if you just want to stall a battle that's going on between two people. And you say, right, well, I think we'll just pause here and let's go around and get everyone's view on this. And then you kind of change the dynamics in that way. Group work, I like to use that a lot, where you actually just give a couple of people or a group of people a particular task, send them off to do it, and they come back and feed in the results of what they've done, and then you record that as well, or you have it up on a whiteboard or with butcher's paper or whatever. So those are approaches you might want to consider. You usually listen to, it's part of the iterative approach, you listen to the video or the tape pretty much immediately you've actually collected it, and identify what are the main things emerging, because you're usually asking similar questions to another focus group probably fairly soon after. So you need those answers to feed in to the next one in the holistic answering of your question. And then you write it all up. There is an example of a focus group transcript for those of you who are going to write it up. It's idiosyncratic. This person likes just having one column for data analysis on the right-hand side, and the rest of it is a transcript straight off the tape. Right, now we're going to move on to observation as a data collection technique. The idea of observation is that you can double check against the interview data that you've got, but you can also get a sense of what goes on in an environment, and you might want to do that before you interview, so that you can say, oh, well, what about this and what about that when you actually do your interview. Traditionally, it would be unobtrusive data collection, because there is a clear notion and a fair bit of substantial data to show that once you go into a field, you actually do disturb that field, and people start to behave differently if they know they're being watched. So if you can watch them unobtrusively, informally, you will probably get some very clear indications of how they normally practice in that particular field. Unfortunately, ethically, it's a bit problematic in terms of real research, that you actually have to get people's permission before you observe them, though there is now a clause in the qualitative ethical domain that you can go out and collect data in an environment where otherwise people would change their behaviour, or if the researcher were to tell people they were observing that they were being observed, the researcher might be at serious risk, say in areas of where there might be drugs being transferred or something like that. So you can go out and observe, and then if you can find the people afterwards, you can get their permission to retain their data in that particular study. So there is an option there. But in this situation, we do allow you to go and observe, and you can do it unobtrusively if you wish. There are various roles that you can occupy when you're decided to be a researcher. You can be a total participant, and there has been some really quite nice studies done there. Being Sane in Insane Places is a total participant study, and one that you're going to have to read in order to answer the quiz and do some work and tutorials this week. So that's an option. In that situation, we had a number of researchers who actually went into mental institutions and became patients and had that experience and documented that through observational data and got some absolutely fantastic results. Then you can be a researcher participant, so you come into the setting and you go out again, and you may have a covert or an overt role. It really doesn't matter. Covert meaning that people don't know you're observing. And the tea room trade is an option of that one, where looking at sex between men in the parklands, which apparently still happens in Adelaide, but it's an old study which was actually located in America. And that's the second one that you're going to have to read in order to do the quiz, so That's a researcher participant role. And the other possibility is a total observer, where everybody knows that you're the observer, you're coming in, you spend an hour in the setting, and then you go out and take your data away, and you come different days, different hours, so that you can actually get a view of what goes on in that particular setting. This is just a checklist that you can take into your setting, or is a good way of training yourself to observe. What do I need to observe? I need to look at the setting. I need to look at the environment, because that often has an impact on what goes on. I need to look at people. I need to look at their appearance. I need to look at what they're wearing, how they interact, how close they get to each other. I need to look at the clothes that they're wearing. I need to look at the kinds of ways they're presenting themselves and how they're interacting with other people, what sort of movement is going on, who's coming in and out of the setting, and so on. So you can go through that checklist, and then it becomes sort of fairly firmly entrenched in your mind as the kind of things that you should generally be looking for. This is a transcript. This is just my own observation. I just went over into one of the clinics at Flinders Medical Centre. I think it was a gynecological clinic, and it just shows the process of writing up. Well, I've gone in, I've sat around, I've observed what the setting looks like, how it's structured, and then I've identified the patients that are there and the staff that are there behind the desk. And the focus of my question is, what is the interaction between the administrative staff and patients in that setting, just in the 10 minutes that I happen to be there. So, and you could go on and pursue that for about an hour if you felt that that was going to take you up to saturation. So if we could summarise all of that, focus groups are a very good way to get data from a number of people over a fairly short period of time, but they do require a fair bit of organisation beforehand, and they do require that you manage it fairly carefully. Observation gives you some beautiful data, particularly if you're collecting it covertly, because you're in the field unobtrusively. And for homework, there's 2 links there to 2 of the studies that we've just been talking about, which you are advised to read before you go in and attempt the quiz for this week. Thank you very much.